Business news now. Brian Quinn is here on set with us. He's starting with big news in the auto industry. Two of the top Japanese car makers exploring a potential merger, Brian.
So, Stuart, Honda and Nissan have confirmed that they are indeed discussing what they call closer collaboration, but they are so far denying reports that an official merger has been decided on. Now, if such a tie-up were to be implemented, it would create a new Japanese giant worth around $55 billion, giving the combined firms new power to compete against Japan's top car maker Toyota, as well as foreign rivals like Volkswagen. And Nissan is already partnered with France's Renault. That alliance, though, is now under review after a recent quarterly loss of around $61 million. Back in November, Nissan launched an emergency plan that included 9,000 job cuts and a 20% production cut. A merger could be controversial in Japan, as it would likely result in even more layoffs and write-downs. It would also likely require Nissan to terminate that partnership with Renault. Now, both Nissan and Honda have been struggling amid increased competition from Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers, as well as slowing consumer demand for EVs. Back in March, the companies announced a strategic partnership on EV development in a bid to stay competitive. Here's Honda's CEO back then.
We both believe that our companies cannot survive unless we adapt to the dynamically changing conventions of the global auto industry resulting from technological innovations. Given the ongoing structural changes in our industry, we asked ourselves if it would be possible for Nissan and Honda to bring together this trust that each of them has been developing over the years, rather than competing in a traditional framework.
So how then, Brian, have the markets been reacting to that news?
Well, Stuart, Nissan shares had their best day in 4 decades. They jumped around 24%. Mitsubishi, of which Nissan is the largest shareholder and which is also reported to be part of those talks, initially popped around 13%. Those shares, though, have since given up the gains. Honda is down more than 3%. On the wider Asian markets, it's a mixed picture following continued losses on Wall Street in Tuesday's session. Tokyo's Nikkei losing around 0.75% as investors await an interest rate decision from the Bank of Japan later in the week. Chinese markets, though, gaining ground amid hopes of a cut in prime lending rates there. Here in Europe, major indexes rising slightly at the open. London's FTSE 100 up 0.25% as UK inflation has hit its highest level in 8 months. Meanwhile, shares in German lender Commerzbank are up 3% as Italian rival Unicredit raises its stake to 28% amid a hostile takeover bid. Global investors, though, are mostly waiting for the latest rate call from the U.S. Federal Reserve later in the day. Most are expecting a 0.25 point cut, but with inflation creeping back up in the States, analysts say future rate cuts are uncertain. Take a listen here.
I think it's a coin flip on a pause in January. It'll really depend on the reports that come out between now and the decision to make in January. But tomorrow, I'm fairly certain that the Fed will cut. If they didn't, it'd be a huge surprise to the marketplace. And I think that a lot of investors would potentially use that as an opportunity to create some selling and some opportunities for volatility.
Now we're going to take you to the Democratic Republic of Congo, filing criminal complaints against Apple subsidiaries here in Europe over so-called conflict minerals, Brian.
So lawyers for the Congolese government say Apple's supply chain is tainted by blood minerals, accusing the tech giant of complicity in crimes committed by militant groups who run mines in the country's east. Some of those minerals are allegedly mined by Rwandan rebels occupying the eastern part of the country. Elita Gadeva has more.
A Silicon Valley giant accused of covering up war crimes in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Congolese government alleges that Apple's supply chain is contaminated with blood minerals smuggled by rebel forces. Lawyers for the government said the scale and duration of these activities have caused unfathomable harm and suffering in the civilian population in parts of the country. The eastern part of DR Congo is rich in precious minerals like tin, tungsten and tantalum, which are essential for manufacturing computers and smartphones. Some artisanal mines are exploited by armed groups that have been connected to massacres of civilians, gang rapes and looting. The United Nations has condemned the exploitation and export of conflict minerals. The DRC's lawsuit also accuses Apple of misleading commercial practices, although the brand says it's monitoring its supply chains.
Although Apple does not directly purchase, procure or source primary minerals, we are committed to meeting and exceeding internationally accepted due diligence standards for primary minerals and recycled materials in our supply chain.
Judicial authorities in France and Belgium are now set to decide whether to investigate the complaints further and bring criminal charges.
Brian, thank you.
Huge demand for those minerals, Stuart, and a lot of concern over how they're being mined, especially in Africa.
Brian Quinn, thank you very much. Brian Quinn reporting with the business news.